He promised he'd never do it. He looked his wife in the eyes, held his kids close, and swore he'd never step into a flooded cave. And for a while, he kept that promise. Until one morning, he didn't. What started as a quiet dive in the French countryside turned into something far more dangerous. The cave looked calm on the surface, still water, no sign of danger. But deep below, it held a secret. One mistake, one wrong decision, and the man who went in didn't come back. He wasn't just any diver. He was experienced, smart. He had trained for this. But sometimes, even the most skilled people don't see the warning signs until it's too late. This story isn't just about a dive. It's about how one choice, one push too far, can change everything. For a man, for a wife, for 3 children who never got to say goodbye. And the worst part? It didn't have to happen. This is the dive that killed a family. And the deeper we go, the more it all starts to unravel. Stay with us, because this story doesn't get easier. It only gets darker. The Broken Promise. There was a time when Waldek Szymanowski lived 2 very different lives. One was loud, fast-paced, and full of energy. He was a successful Polish stockbroker during the country's post-communist economic boom, making fast trades, talking faster, and rising quickly. The other life was quieter, simpler. He was a family man, a father to 3 young children, a husband with weekend barbecues, school pickups, bedtime stories, and in that second life, Waldek made a promise. "I'll never go near those flooded caves," he told his wife one winter night in 2001. She was watching a documentary with him about cave diving accidents, men lost forever, families left without answers. He laughed at the danger. She didn't. She made him promise, and he did. But Waldek had always been drawn to the edge of things. He wasn't reckless, but he didn't believe in safety nets either. In the late 80s, he had joined a British caving team, hiking through the frozen Tatras, exploring mountain shafts in below-zero blizzards. He was lean, athletic, and wired with that kind of restlessness you can't train into someone, or out of them. Still, for years he kept that promise. He climbed, he worked, he lived. But the quiet didn't last. By the time he turned 42, something started gnawing at him. He had climbed the peaks, run the numbers, provided for his family. But every time he saw a younger caver disappear into a flooded sump, a part of him tightened. They get to go further. They get to know what's down there. And he didn't. It started slowly. A new dry suit, a dive computer, then a rebreather. He told himself it was for open water, safe stuff, controlled environments, but by summer he had enrolled in a cave diving course, quietly, rebelliously. Waldek was no fool. He knew the risks, but that was part of the draw. The tighter the squeeze, the higher the stakes, the more alive he felt. He didn't crave recklessness. He craved the precision and control required to survive it. Still, some lines shouldn't be crossed. When he went on his first cave diving expedition in Romania later that year, he didn't tell his wife. He dove to 150 feet, pushed his lungs, his gear, his limits, came back glowing and lying. Back home, everything looked normal. Dinner at the table, homework help, kisses goodnight. But something inside Waldek had changed. He had tasted that underwater silence, that pitch-black world where you float, weightless, in a place humans were never meant to go. It wasn't enough to keep the promise anymore. He needed more. And from that point on, every trip he took, every cave he charted, every meter he dove deeper than before, it wasn't just a test of skill, it was a quiet betrayal. One he knew could break everything. And one day, it would. Into the obsession. Waldek might have started small, but once the line was crossed, he dove head first. In the cave diving world, one name stood above the rest in Poland. Wiktor Bolek, a pioneer, a mentor, a man who had explored caves others wouldn't dare enter. When Waldek met Wiktor in mid-2001, it was like gasoline meeting flame. Wiktor helped him pick out gear, introduced him to rebreathers, and took him on his first real expedition. They drove together to the East Burutec Resurgence in Romania. It wasn't a tourist dive. This was serious depth, cold water, and full immersion in pitch-black tunnels. Waldeck hit 150 feet that day. He had barely scratched the surface, and he was hooked. He bought the Buddy Inspiration rebreather with the year-end bonus from his job. Took more courses, trained relentlessly. By 2003, he was logging over 30 cave dives a year, with one reaching 337 feet, his personal best. He created an online dive journal called Deep and High, tracking every expedition. To outsiders, it looked like passion. To those closest to him, it was addiction. The deeper he went, the less he shared. Not just about the dives, but about the risks. And as his dives got longer, his gear more complex, and his routes more remote, his risk tolerance climbed sharply. The equipment wasn't always reliable. Rebreathers needed constant adjustment. Mixes had to be calculated perfectly. Every breath could be a gamble if something went wrong, but Waldeck loved the challenge. He once said to a fellow diver, "The harder it is to survive, the more beautiful it becomes." Then came the loss. In May 2004, Victor Bolek died during a dive in a flooded quarry. Officially, it was natural causes. But among divers, there's no such thing. Every death has a moment, a second too slow, a setting not checked, a decision made too late. Waldeck took the news like a blow to the chest. He shut down. For nearly 2 months, he barely left the house. Some say he didn't speak. He barely ate. Something about Victor's death forced him to see the line more clearly. The one between thrill and tragedy. Between obsession and the point of no return. But Waldeck didn't stop. He came back sharper, focused, more technical, more prepared, more driven than ever before. He took over the expeditions Victor had planned, pushed deeper, further. Because now it wasn't just about curiosity or records, it was about finishing what Victor started and proving, maybe to himself, that he could go to the edge and come back. Only next time, he wouldn't. The forbidden depths of Goules du Pont. In the diving world, some caves are spoken about in hushed tones. Goules du Pont is one of them. Tucked away in the quiet French countryside near Bourg Saint-Andéol, it looks harmless from the outside, just a peaceful pool under a stone bridge. But beneath that still surface lies a submerged labyrinth. Twisting corridors, vertical drops, and blind corners that have swallowed experienced divers whole. Locals call it cursed. Old French explorers once nicknamed it La Bouche de l'Enfer, the mouth of hell. And that's exactly where Waldeck wanted to go. In April 2005, almost a year after Victor's death, Waldeck arrived in France with a small group of divers. His goal was clear: to break his personal depth record of 337 feet, a mark he had held since 2003. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing closure. The day before the big dive, he tested his equipment in a nearby cave, Goules de la Tannerie. His Buddy Inspiration rebreather had a bit of moisture buildup, nothing serious, just enough to make a lesser diver think twice. Waldeck didn't hesitate. He had planned this dive meticulously. 2 10-liter bailout cylinders, one with 1550 Trimix for depth, the other with nitrox for shallows. His custom-configured rebreather was ready, loaded with backup systems, computer controls, and emergency fail-safes. But the deeper the cave, the less any of that matters. Goules du Pont is not for beginners, not even for intermediates. This system had been pushed down to 583 feet by elite French teams. Most of it is completely submerged. A mistake here doesn't give you a surface to swim to. Only rock, silence, and crushing pressure. At 9:55 a.m. on April 6, 2005, Waldeck entered the water. He had a 6-hour window. He told the surface team to expect him back by 3 p.m. As he lowered himself into the cave's entry pool, he passed through the familiar shingle-filled constriction at 39 feet, squeezing through with his bulky gear. His bright yellow rebreather casing looked almost cartoonish in the tight tunnel. Not made for cave diving, but he trusted it. Inside, the cave opened up. The water was unusually clear that day, visibility stretching far ahead. His helmet lights pierced through the dark. The silence was absolute. At 59 feet, the tunnel changed. The horizontal path suddenly dropped. A steep vertical shaft leading straight into blackness. This was the point of no return. From here, it wasn't just about depth, it was about descent control, gas pressure, buoyancy, rebreather chemistry, and the creeping fog of nitrogen narcosis. Waldeck adjusted his buoyancy and let himself begin the fall. With every foot he dropped, the cave grew colder, tighter, more foreign. He was chasing a number, a moment, a feeling, but he was also descending into the heart of something no man can fully prepare for. And something, deep down, had already started to go wrong. The final descent. Waldeck was now fully committed to the dive. The only way out was back up. As he passed 164 feet, a subtle shift began. Not in the cave, but in him. His thoughts slowed. His reactions dulled. Nitrogen narcosis had crept in, like a fog in his brain. Divers call it the rapture of the deep. You feel calm, confident, almost euphoric, and that's what makes it so deadly. Waldeck wasn't unaware of the symptoms. He had felt them before, but he had always been able to push through until now. At 259 feet, he reached a horizontal gallery and continued moving forward. His breathing was heavy. The rebreather wasn't failing yet, but it was struggling. The deeper he went, the denser the gas became, making it harder to inhale, harder to exhale. It was like breathing through a straw under pressure. Then came the 98-foot vertical pitch, a near-straight drop beginning around 260 feet. Waldeck hesitated, just for a moment. Then he vented a little more air from his BCD and dropped in. He was now past 300 feet. He should have turned around. But Waldeck was goal-oriented. He wanted 344, maybe 350, just enough to beat his record and make it back in one piece. Instead, he lost control. His descent sped up. His rebreather couldn't keep up with the CO2 buildup. He started rebreathing carbon dioxide, his body screaming for clean air. His limbs grew heavy. His vision narrowed. He didn't even know how far he'd gone. At 344 feet, Waldeck crashed onto a rocky ledge, hard. It might have stunned him, or maybe he was already semi-conscious. What's clear is he realized something was wrong. He reached for the final lifeline, his onboard emergency cylinder. It worked. For a moment, he could breathe again, a few precious gulps of Trimix, but that onboard tank only lasted a minute at best. His backup cylinder, his true escape route, was still strapped to his side. He didn't move. Why? Maybe his arms weren't working. Maybe his brain was too fogged to think. Maybe his body had given up before his mind could. The last thing he did was nothing. The mouthpiece slipped from his lips. He never reached the bailout tank. He drowned alone in a cave carved by ancient water, surrounded by silence so complete it could swallow time. Later, recovery divers would find his body facing back toward the exit, angled like he had just turned to leave. He was close, but in cave diving, close isn't enough. Something goes horribly wrong. 1621 hot, 550 words. It's impossible to say the exact moment things cross the line. But somewhere after 300 feet, Waldeck's dive stopped being about records and became a slow-motion disaster. Divers who reviewed his computer data believe he lost control of his descent during the final pitch. The vertical shaft was steep, and he didn't regulate his buoyancy well enough. The deeper he dropped, the less time his rebreather had to adjust, and the more dense the gas became. He was likely fighting to breathe, each inhale feeling like dragging air through thick syrup. Worse still, his mind was no longer his own. Narcosis clouds judgment. Panic distorts reality. Simple tasks feel impossible. Operating a rebreather under these conditions is like defusing a bomb with frozen fingers. One small mistake becomes irreversible. Experts believe the real error came from his gas management. Waldeck may have accidentally switched to an air diluent instead of the 1550 trimix he needed at that depth. The result? a massive spike in nitrogen intake which made the narcosis hit him like a freight train, and then he hit the ledge at 344 feet. It was a hard landing. His rebreather didn't shut off, but the mouthpiece came loose. Without a proper seal, water can enter the loop, and that can be fatal. But Waldeck wasn't done. He had made a custom modification to his rebreather. It allowed him to bypass the main circuit and breathe directly from a small onboard cylinder, a kind of last chance system. Somehow, even in his condition, he reached for it, flipped the switch, and it worked. He could breathe again, but only for a minute. That little tank wasn't meant to save him. It was meant to buy him just enough time to grab the real bailout cylinder mounted to his side. The problem? He never made the move. His body stayed still. Some say he couldn't move. Others think he simply blacked out before realizing what to do next. Whatever the reason, he stayed there, breathing in silence, waiting, and then nothing. When Waldeck didn't surface by 3:00 p.m., his dive team knew something was wrong. 2 divers suited up and went down, but they couldn't go past 230 feet. Too deep, too dangerous. Waldeck was already beyond reach. The authorities were notified, but this wasn't a rescue anymore. It was a body recovery. The next morning, French cave divers descended into Goule du Pont. They found Waldeck's body exactly where the data had predicted, at 344 feet, slumped on the ledge, mouthpiece hanging loose, angled toward the exit. He had tried to leave. He just never made it. Family shattered. Back home in Poland, Waldeck's family was waiting. His wife knew the dive was happening. She had begged him not to go, pleaded, reminded him of the promise he once made. But Waldeck was already in France, already gone. When the phone rang on the evening of April 6th, she knew. Not right away, not officially, but deep in her gut, she knew something was broken beyond repair. The official call came later, confirmation. The dive had gone wrong. Waldeck wasn't coming back. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Not at first. She sat on the edge of the kitchen chair while her children played in the next room. 3 small voices filled the air. And in that moment, something sank deeper than any cave dive ever could. Waldeck wasn't just a diver. He was a father who read bedtime stories, who packed school lunches, who laughed at cartoons and fixed broken toys, and now he was gone. The body took over a month to come home. Bureaucratic delays, transport logistics, autopsy. French authorities began an investigation. Meanwhile, Waldeck's diving team returned to Poland, some with pieces of his gear still in their possession. The family never got a clear answer why. Rumors started swirling, conspiracies, arguments, and while others debated what happened in the cave, his wife was left alone, planning a funeral for the man she thought she knew, now shattered by the truth of what he'd been hiding. On May 14, 2005, Waldeck was buried in Warsaw. The service was quiet, sorrowful, a closed casket. A few dive friends spoke. Some offered condolences, others didn't show at all. His children didn't fully understand. One kept asking if Dad would be home next week. What do you say to that? There was no insurance payout, no official compensation. The only thing left behind was grief and the crushing weight of a broken promise. His wife would later tell a friend, it wasn't the cave that killed him, it was the lie, the choice he made to go. For her, Waldeck's last dive wasn't an accident. It was a decision, one that took their family with him. Theories, failures, and conspiracies. Waldeck's death didn't just echo through the cave diving community, it divided it. At first, the cause seemed simple. He mismanaged his gas, got hit with narcosis, and drowned. But as more divers reviewed his logs and heard what little the recovery team could report, doubts began to grow. The official French report, released in November 2005, cited two key factors. The diluent gas used during the descent was improperly prepared. He had switched to a wrong cylinder during the dive, possibly breathing air instead of trimix at extreme depths. This could explain the sudden onset of narcosis between 260 and 295 feet. According to experts, it would have been like flipping a switch in the brain. One breath too rich in nitrogen at that depth, and cognition starts to collapse. But the report raised other questions too. Why didn't Waldeck notice the mix issue before descending? Why didn't he switch to the proper cylinder? Had he tested the gases the day before? Or, more disturbingly, did he believe he was still breathing trimix when he wasn't? There's another theory: rebreather failure. Some divers believe his rebreather's CO2 scrubber may have malfunctioned, causing carbon dioxide to accumulate in his breathing loop. That would explain the rapid exhaustion and unconsciousness near the end. Others pointed fingers at the equipment setup itself. Waldeck was wearing bulky gear not optimized for caves, tight tunnels, limited movement, high drag. Was it a setup designed for ego, not survival? And then there's the controversy no one wanted to touch. Why did his team hold back gear from the French investigators? It's known that some of Waldeck's diving cylinders and equipment were never handed over. Why? Fear of blame? Guilt? Or were they hiding evidence of a known problem? His wife never got clear answers, just fragments, unfinished reports, whispers from the community. And to this day, no one can say exactly why an experienced diver, one of Poland's best, made a rookie mistake in the most dangerous part of the dive. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe overconfidence, maybe he'd simply pushed his body too far, one time too many. But one thing's certain: no one expected it to end this way, and the cave hasn't given up its secrets since. Subscribe for more tragic cave diving stories. Like the video if it kept you holding your breath. And hit the bell icon so you never miss a descent into the unknown. Until next time, dive safe or don't dive at all.